The telegram arrived on the hottest day of August in 1873, and when Helena Thornton read the words scrawled across that thin yellow paper, her world collapsed like a house of cards in a Kansas windstorm. Her brother Thomas was dead. The farm was gone. Everything she had known, everything she had counted on, had vanished in the space of a single sentence. Helena stood on the dusty main street of Calistoga, California, clutching that telegram so tightly her knuckles turned white and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had traveled 3 weeks by train and stagecoach to reach this town, expecting to find her brother waiting with open arms and a place for her to finally call home. Instead, she found nothing but debt collectors and empty promises. The lawyer, a thin man with spectacles that kept sliding down his nose, had explained it all in his cramped office above the general store. Thomas had taken loans to expand the farm. The drought had killed his crops. When he died of fever 2 weeks ago, the bank had seized everything. The land, the house, the livestock, even the furniture Helena had grown up with back in Missouri. There was nothing left. Not a penny. Not a single possession she could claim as her own except the worn carpetbag she carried and the plain blue dress she wore. "I am sorry, Miss Thornton," the lawyer had said, and he had sounded genuinely regretful. "Your brother was a good man. He just had terrible luck." Luck. Helena wanted to laugh at that word, but she was afraid if she started, it would turn into sobbing, and she had learned long ago that crying never solved anything. She was 21 years old, alone in a town where she knew no one, with exactly $4.30 to her name. She had left Missouri because there was nothing for her there after their parents died. Now she had even less here in California. She walked down the wooden sidewalk of Calistoga's Main Street, past the saloon where piano music jangled through the swinging doors, past the mercantile with its colorful displays of goods she could not afford, past the hotel where she had spent her last 2 nights burning through her meager savings. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat trickled down her back beneath her corset. Around her, the town bustled with life. Cowboys rode past on dusty horses. Women in bonnets hurried about their errands. Somewhere a dog barked, and children laughed as they chased each other between buildings. Helena felt completely invisible, as though she had already become a ghost. She needed work. That much was clear. But what kind of work could a single woman find in a town like this? She had no particular skills beyond basic farming and housekeeping. She could read and write, which was more than some could say, but that hardly qualified her for anything. Teaching positions required references and connections she did not have. The only businesses that seemed to be hiring women were the saloons and dance halls, and Helena knew what that kind of work entailed. She was desperate, but not yet that desperate. The sun was beginning to sink toward the mountains when Helena found herself at the edge of town, near the livery stable. She could hear horses nickering inside, and the rhythmic sound of hammer on anvil from the adjacent blacksmith shop. Without really thinking about where she was going, she wandered closer, drawn by the familiar sounds and smells of animals and hay. It reminded her of home, of better days. A man emerged from the stable leading a magnificent bay horse. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin. He wore dusty trousers, scuffed boots, and a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. A battered hat sat low on his head, shadowing his face. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, speaking quietly to the horse as he led it toward the water trough. Helena stopped, suddenly self-conscious about her presence. This was not her place. She should leave. But before she could turn away, the man looked up and saw her. For a moment, their eyes met, and Helena felt something strange flutter in her chest. His eyes were a striking light brown, almost amber in the late afternoon sun, and they regarded her with frank curiosity but no hostility. "Can I help you, miss?" His voice was deep and measured with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "I apologize," Helena said quickly. "I did not mean to intrude. I was just walking." The man tilted his hat back slightly, studying her with those unusual eyes. "No intrusion. This is a public place. You are welcome to be here." He turned his attention back to the horse, letting it drink deeply from the trough. Helena knew she should leave, but something kept her rooted to the spot. Perhaps it was loneliness. Perhaps it was the way he had spoken to her with simple courtesy, without the judgment she had felt from so many others in town today. Whatever it was, she found herself lingering. "That is a beautiful horse," she said, then immediately felt foolish. What kind of conversation was that? But the man smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Thank you. His name is Copper. He is temperamental as hell, but he is also the fastest horse I have ever owned." He patted the animal's neck affectionately. "You are a rancher?" Helena asked. "Among other things." "I own some land north of here. Run cattle mostly, some horses." He paused, then extended his hand. "Isaac Yates." Helena hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was warm and firm without being crushing. "Helena Thornton." "Thornton," Isaac repeated, his brow furrowing. "Any relation to Thomas Thornton?" Helena felt her throat tighten. "He was my brother." Understanding flooded Isaac's face, followed by genuine sympathy. "I heard about his passing. I am truly sorry. Thomas was a good neighbor. He helped me out more than once when I first started building my place." "You knew him?" Something in Helena's chest loosened slightly. Here, at last, was someone who had known Thomas, who could confirm he had existed and mattered. "Not well, but yes. We would cross paths at the feed store, sometimes at the saloon. He talked about his sister back in Missouri." "I take it you just arrived 3 days ago." Helena's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I came to live with him. I did not know he had died until I reached town." Isaac was quiet for a moment, still holding the horse's reins. When he spoke again, his tone was gentle. "Have you got somewhere to stay? Family here?" "No family. I have been at the hotel, but—" She trailed off, not wanting to admit just how dire her situation was. Isaac seemed to understand anyway. He was quiet for a long moment, appearing to wrestle with some internal decision. Finally, he said, "Miss Thornton, I hope you will not think me forward, but I heard about your brother's debts. I know the bank took everything. Are you all right? Do you have resources?" Helena's pride warred with her desperation. The pride lost. "No," she admitted quietly. "I do not." Isaac nodded slowly, as though she had confirmed something he already suspected. "Can I buy you dinner? There is a decent restaurant next to the hotel. Nothing fancy, but the food is good and honest." "I could not possibly," Helena began, but Isaac raised a hand. "Please. I would like to talk to you about something. A proposition, if you will hear me out. But you look like you have not eaten today, and I will not have that conversation with a hungry person. So let me buy you a meal, and then I will explain, and you can tell me to go to hell if you want. Fair enough." Helena studied his face, looking for any sign of impropriety or bad intent. She found none. Isaac Yates looked at her with straightforward honesty, and after the day she had endured, that was enough. "All right," she said. "Thank you." The restaurant was small but clean, with checked tablecloths and the smell of roasting meat filling the air. Isaac held the door for her and guided her to a corner table away from the other diners. A tired-looking woman brought them water and took their orders. Isaac ordered steak and potatoes for both of them, along with coffee and bread. As they waited for the food, Helena found herself studying him more openly. He was older than her, probably close to 30, with fine lines around his eyes that spoke of long hours in the sun. There was something solid about him, something that made her think of oak trees and stone foundations. He did not fill the silence with nervous chatter, seeming content to wait until the food arrived before beginning whatever conversation he had in mind. When the plates came, laden with more food than Helena had seen in days, she had to force herself not to fall on it like a starving animal. She ate slowly, savoring every bite while Isaac did the same across from her. The steak was tender, the potatoes creamy with butter, the bread fresh and warm. It was the best meal she had eaten since leaving Missouri. When she had taken the edge off her hunger, Isaac set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. "Miss Thornton, what I am about to say is going to sound strange. I want you to hear me all the way through before you respond." "Can you do that?" Helena felt her stomach tighten with anxiety, but she nodded. "I need a wife," Isaac said bluntly. "Not for any romantic reason, though I hope we could become friends at least, but I need a partner, someone to help run my ranch and make it a real home. I have been building that place for 5 years now, and it is coming along well. I have a good house, productive land, healthy cattle, and money in the bank. What I do not have is someone to share it with." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee before continuing. "I know how this sounds. We just met an hour ago. You do not know me, and I do not really know you. But here is what I do know. You are Thomas's sister, and Thomas was a good man. You are clearly educated and capable. You are in a bad situation through no fault of your own, and I have more than enough to share." Isaac leaned forward, his amber eyes serious and sincere. "I am not asking you to love me. I am not expecting anything beyond partnership and companionship. What I am offering is security, a home, a future. My wealth is yours if you will have me. Everything I own we would own together. You would never have to worry about money or a roof over your head again, and in return, I would get a partner to help build something lasting." Helena stared at him, her mind reeling. Was he serious? This was insane. People did not propose marriage to strangers over dinner. Except, she realized, they did. She had heard of such arrangements before. Mail-order brides who traveled west to marry men they had never met. Women who accepted proposals from widowers needing help with children and homesteads. It was not common, perhaps, but it was not unheard of either. And in the wild practicality of the West, sometimes survival mattered more than romance. "Why me?" she asked finally. "You could place an advertisement, find someone who knows you already. Why offer this to a stranger, honestly?" "Because I saw you standing by the stable looking lost, and I remembered what Thomas said about his sister. He said you were smart and stubborn and loyal. He said when your parents died, you kept the household running for 2 years on almost nothing before the creditors finally took that farm too. He said you never complained, never gave up, just did what needed to be done. That is exactly the kind of person I need as a partner." Helena felt tears prick her eyes at hearing her brother's words repeated back to her. Thomas had said those things about her. She had not known. "I know this is sudden," Isaac continued. "I am not asking you to decide right now. Take a few days. Stay at the hotel on my account while you think it over. Get to know me a bit if you want. Ask around town about my reputation. But Helena, I am not going to lie to you. I am offering this because I need a wife, yes, but also because you need help and I am in a position to give it. That seems like a fair trade to me." "And if I say no?" Helena asked quietly. "Then I pay for your meals and hotel for a week anyway, and I help you find work in town. I am not trying to trap you or take advantage. I am trying to offer an honest solution to both our problems." Helena looked down at her half-eaten steak, her mind spinning. This was crazy. Absolutely crazy. She barely knew this man, but what were her alternatives? She could stay in Calistoga and try to find work as a laundress or perhaps a cook if someone would hire her without references. She could save every penny and maybe, eventually, afford passage back to Missouri, where she had nothing waiting for her anyway. Or she could accept this impossible offer and gain security, a home, a future. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything? Why have you not married before now? You must be close to 30. Surely there have been opportunities." Isaac smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I was engaged once, back in Texas. Her name was Mary. She died of cholera 3 months before the wedding. That was 7 years ago. After that, I left Texas and came here to start fresh. I focused on building my ranch, and I told myself I would think about marriage later. But later has a way of turning into never if you let it. I am tired of being alone, Miss Thornton. I am tired of coming home to an empty house. I want to build something that matters, and I do not want to do it by myself anymore." The raw honesty in his voice touched something in Helena. She understood loss, she understood loneliness, and she understood the bone-deep weariness of fighting every battle alone. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course. Take all the time you need." They finished their meal in contemplative silence. Isaac walked her back to the hotel afterward, tipped his hat politely, and told her to send word to the front desk if she needed anything or wanted to talk further. Then he was gone, disappearing into the gathering dusk, leaving Helena standing in the hotel lobby with her head spinning and her heart pounding. She spent that night lying awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling and turning Isaac's proposal over in her mind. It was insane. Marrying a stranger was insane. But what was sane in her situation? Starving slowly while looking for work that might not exist, accepting charity until people grew tired of helping her, ending up in one of those dance halls after all with no other options left. The next morning, Helena did what Isaac had suggested. She asked around town about him. She spoke to the man who ran the general store, who said Isaac Yates always paid his bills on time and treated people fairly. She talked to the banker, who confirmed that Isaac had substantial holdings and a solid reputation. She even spoke to the woman who ran the boarding house, who said Isaac was quiet but kind, and that he had once helped fix her roof after a storm without asking for payment. Every person she talked to said essentially the same thing. Isaac Yates was a good man, honest and hardworking, not given to drinking or gambling or any of the vices that plagued so many men in the West. He kept to himself mostly, focused on his ranch, but he would help a neighbor in need without hesitation. On the third day after that strange dinner, Helena sent word through the hotel desk that she wanted to see Isaac's ranch. If she was going to consider this proposal seriously, she needed to see what she would be committing to. Isaac arrived that afternoon in a wagon drawn by 2 sturdy horses. He helped her up onto the seat beside him with casual courtesy, and they set off north out of Calistoga. The road wound through rolling hills covered in golden grass and scattered oak trees. The August heat was still oppressive, but a faint breeze stirred the air, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant pine. "How much land do you have?" Helena asked as they traveled. "About 800 acres, Isaac replied. "Not huge by some standards, but good land. There is a creek that runs through the property year-round, which is worth its weight in gold in this climate. I have about 200 head of cattle right now, and I am building that number slowly. I also have a dozen horses, chickens, a couple of milk cows, and a vegetable garden that desperately needs someone who knows what they are doing." Despite herself, Helena smiled at that last part. "You do not garden. I try. The plants usually die. I can keep cattle alive just fine, but apparently, tomatoes hate me." They talked as they traveled, and Helena found herself relaxing into the conversation. Isaac told her about building his ranch from scratch, about the first winter when he had lived in a tent while constructing the house, about learning to manage cattle and deal with predators, and survive the harsh realities of running a ranch alone. He spoke matter-of-factly about the challenges, but Helena could hear the pride underneath. This was his life's work, and he had every right to be proud. When they crested a final hill, Isaac pulled the wagon to a stop. "There," he said simply. Helena looked down into a small valley, and her breath caught. The ranch spread out before them, nestled along a creek lined with cottonwood trees. The house was solidly built from wood and stone, with a covered porch running along the front. Nearby stood a large barn, several smaller outbuildings, and a network of corrals. Cattle grazed in the distance, dark shapes against the golden grass. It was not fancy or grand, but it was substantial and real, a working ranch that spoke of years of hard labor and careful planning. "The house has 4 rooms," Isaac said. "A main room with a kitchen area, 2 bedrooms, and a small room I use for storage but could be anything. There is a root cellar underneath for keeping things cool. The barn has space for 8 horses, plus equipment storage and a tack room. The water from the creek is clean and reliable. I have been working on building up the herd and improving the bloodlines. In another few years, this place could support twice the number of cattle we have now." He glanced at Helena, and his expression was hopeful but guarded. "What do you think?" "It is beautiful," Helena said honestly. "You have built something impressive here, Mr. Yates." "Isaac, please. If we are going to be partners, Mr. Yates seems too formal. Partners. Not husband and wife, but partners." Helena appreciated that distinction. It made this feel less like a romantic arrangement and more like a business proposition, which somehow made it easier to consider. They drove down to the ranch, and Isaac showed her everything. The house was simple but comfortable, with good furniture and a large stone fireplace. The kitchen area had a proper stove and ample workspace. The bedroom Isaac indicated would be hers was spacious and bright, with a real bed frame and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Everything was clean but clearly lacking a woman's touch. There were no curtains, no rugs, no small comforts that turned a house into a home. Outside, Isaac introduced her to his ranch hands. There were 2 men who helped with the cattle and general labor. Marcus was an older man with gray in his beard and a missing finger from an old accident. James was younger, probably only a few years older than Helena, with freckles and a friendly smile. Both men tipped their hats politely and welcomed her without any hint of judgment or surprise at her presence. As the afternoon wore on, Helena found herself imagining what life here could be like. She pictured curtains in the windows and vegetables growing in neat rows in the garden. She imagined learning the rhythms of ranch life, helping with the animals, perhaps even learning to ride. It would be hard work, certainly, but hard work had never frightened her. What frightened her was the uncertainty, the vulnerability of having nothing and no one to depend on the ride back to Calistoga, as the sun began to sink toward the western hills. Isaac said, "I know you probably need more time. I am not trying to rush you. But I want you to know that if you agree to this, I will do everything in my power to make sure you never regret it. I cannot promise love or romance. I cannot even promise it will be easy. But I can promise partnership, respect, and security. And I can promise that everything I have will be yours as much as mine." Helena watched the passing landscape, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision before her. Finally, she said, "Can I ask you one more thing?" "Of course." "If I do this, if I marry you, would you expect, that is, would you want a real marriage, children?" Isaac was quiet for a moment, and Helena felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment at the question, but it needed to be asked. "I would like children eventually, yes," Isaac said carefully. But I would not force that or rush it. If we married, I would be content to let things develop naturally between us. We could start as partners and friends and see where that leads. I would not demand anything from you that you were not willing to give freely. It was a fair answer. More than fair, really. Helena took a deep breath and made her decision. "Ask me properly," she said. Isaac turned to look at her, surprise and hope mingling on his face. "What? You have made me an offer, but you have not actually asked me to marry you." "If I am going to say yes, I want to be asked properly." A slow smile spread across Isaac's face. He pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road. Then he climbed down, walked around to Helena's side, and looked up at her with those amber eyes. "Helena Thornton, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Would you partner with me to build a life and a home together? Would you take everything I have to offer and make it ours?" Helena looked down at him. This man she barely knew, who was offering her salvation in the form of partnership and honesty. She thought of Thomas, who had clearly trusted and liked Isaac. She thought of the empty hotel room waiting for her in town and the bleakness of her alternatives. But most of all, she thought of that ranch in the valley, solid and real, and the possibility of building something that mattered. "Yes," she said. "I will marry you, Isaac Yates." The smile that broke across Isaac's face was like sunrise. He reached up to help her down from the wagon, and when her feet touched the ground, he took both her hands in his. "You will not regret this," he said. "I swear to you, Helena, you will not regret this." They were married 4 days later in Calistoga's small church, with the preacher's wife and the general store owner as witnesses. Helena wore her only dress, the same blue one she had worn the day she arrived in town, now freshly cleaned and pressed. Isaac wore dark trousers and a clean white shirt, his hair neatly combed and his boots polished. The ceremony was simple and quick, but when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Isaac squeezed Helena's hand gently, and she felt something settle in her chest. A sense of rightness, perhaps. Or maybe just relief that she was no longer alone. After the ceremony, they had lunch at the same restaurant where Isaac had first made his proposal. Then they loaded Helena's few possessions into the wagon and headed north to the ranch. Her ranch now, Helena reminded herself. Her home. The first weeks of marriage were strange and surprisingly easy. Isaac had been true to his word about giving her space. He took the smaller bedroom and gave Helena the larger one. They ate meals together and worked side by side during the day, but there was no pressure, no awkwardness, just two people learning to live in the same space and work toward common goals. Helena threw herself into making the house a home. She sewed curtains from fabric Isaac bought for her in town. She planted a fall garden with lettuce and root vegetables that would survive the cooling weather. She learned to cook on the big stove, experimenting with recipes her mother had taught her and adapting them to the ingredients available. She cleaned and organized, adding small touches that made the house feel warm and welcoming. Isaac, for his part, was an ideal partner. He was patient and respectful, never demanding, always considerate. He taught Helena about the ranch, explaining how they managed the cattle and horses, showing her how to read the land and the weather. He introduced her to the neighboring ranchers when they came by, presenting her with obvious pride as his wife. At night, they would sit on the porch and talk as the stars emerged overhead. Isaac told her stories about Texas and his journey west. Helena shared memories of Missouri and her childhood with Thomas. Slowly, carefully, they were building something more than a business arrangement. They were becoming friends. One evening in late September, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Isaac said, "You are happy here. You are not regretting your decision." Helena considered the question honestly. "I do not regret it," she said. "This is a good life, Isaac, better than I had any right to hope for after Thomas died. You have been kinder to me than I had any reason to expect." "It is not kindness," Isaac said quietly. "You have earned everything here twice over. You work harder than anyone I have ever met. This ranch has never run more smoothly." Helena felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "We make a good team," she said. "We do." Isaac was quiet for a moment, then added, "Helena, I want you to know that you can stay in your own room for as long as you need. I meant what I said about not rushing anything, but I also want you to know that this has become more than a business arrangement for me. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find myself listening for your voice throughout the day. You have made this house feel like a home in ways I did not know I was missing." Helena's heart began to beat faster. She had felt the shift between them too, the way their conversations had deepened, the way her eyes sought him out when he was working in the corrals. She had told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural affection that comes from living and working closely with someone. But she knew it was more than that. "I feel that way too," she admitted softly. Isaac turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes were very bright. "May I court you properly then? I know we are already married, which makes this backward, but I want to do this right. I want you to know that I choose you not just as a partner, but as someone I am coming to care for very much." "I would like that," Helena said, and meant it. So began the strangest and sweetest courtship Helena could have imagined. They were already married, already living together, already partners in running the ranch. But Isaac courted her with deliberate tenderness. He brought her wildflowers from the hills. He took her on rides to show her beautiful spots on the property. He sat with her in the evenings and asked about her dreams and fears and hopes for the future. Helena found herself falling in love with him slowly, steadily, like water wearing down stone. She loved his quiet strength, his gentle humor, his absolute reliability. She loved the way he treated the animals with firm kindness. She loved how he never made her feel less than equal, always asking her opinion and listening to her ideas about the ranch. On a cool October night, 6 weeks after their wedding, Helena knocked on Isaac's bedroom door. When he opened it, clearly surprised, she said simply, "I do not want to sleep alone anymore." Understanding and joy flashed across Isaac's face. He held out his hand, and when Helena took it, he pulled her gently into the room. They made love that night slowly and carefully, learning each other with tenderness and growing passion. Afterward, wrapped in Isaac's arms with her head on his chest, Helena finally felt like she was truly home. As autumn turned to winter, their marriage deepened into something neither of them had expected but both had hoped for. They worked together during the day, managing the ranch and planning for the future. At night, they retreated to their shared bedroom, finding comfort and pleasure in each other's arms. The partnership they had started with evolved into genuine love, the kind that grows from mutual respect and shared labor and the daily choice to care for each other. In December, they hosted Christmas dinner for their ranch hands and several neighbors. Helena cooked for days, preparing a feast that filled the house with delicious smells. As she watched Isaac laugh with Marcus and James, as she served food to people who were becoming friends, Helena felt a profound sense of gratitude. This life, this home, these people, it was more than she had ever dared hope for. That night, after everyone had left, Isaac pulled her close in front of the fireplace. "I love you," he said. "I know that was not part of our original agreement, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I love you, Helena." Tears filled Helena's eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I would, but I do. So very much." They kissed in the firelight, and Helena marveled at how much had changed in just a few months. She had arrived in Calistoga penniless and alone, with nothing but grief and fear. Now she had a home, a partner, and love she had not been looking for but had found anyway. The winter passed in a comfortable rhythm. They worked hard, managing the cattle through the cold months and planning improvements to the ranch. Isaac talked about expanding the herd in the spring. Helena dreamed about adding chickens and maybe some sheep for wool. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking about their days. In February, Helena realized she had not bled in 2 months. At first she was not sure, but as the weeks passed and other signs appeared, the morning nausea, the tenderness in her breasts, the bone-deep tiredness, she became certain. She was pregnant. She told Isaac on a Sunday afternoon as they sat on the porch watching clouds roll across the sky. He was quiet for a long moment after she spoke, and Helena felt a flutter of anxiety. They had talked about children, but wanting them in the abstract was different from the reality of a baby on the way. Then, Isaac turned to her with tears in his eyes and the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Really? A baby?" "Really," Helena confirmed. Isaac pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "Thank you for saying yes that day. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for making me the happiest man in California." Helena laughed, her own tears spilling over. "Thank you for offering. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for giving me a home." They held each other as the afternoon sun warmed the porch, both of them quietly marveling at the unexpected beauty of the life they were building together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Helena continued working around the ranch through the spring and summer, though Isaac grew increasingly protective as her belly swelled. He insisted she stop lifting heavy things and stay out of the summer heat during the hottest part of the day. Helena complained about being coddled, but secretly she loved his attentiveness. In September, just over a year after Helena had arrived in Calistoga, she went into labor. Isaac rode like mad to fetch the doctor from town while Marcus stayed with Helena, looking terrified and completely out of his depth. The labor lasted through the night and into the next afternoon, long hours of pain that tested Helena's endurance. But when the baby finally arrived, red-faced and screaming with healthy lungs, Helena forgot all about the pain. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, placing the tiny, squirming bundle on Helena's chest. Helena looked down at her son in wonder. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. Tiny fingers, tiny toes, a button nose, and a head covered in dark fuzz. She felt a love so fierce and overwhelming it nearly stole her breath. Isaac, who had returned hours ago and waited anxiously in the main room during the birth, came in as soon as the doctor allowed. He approached the bed slowly, his eyes wide with awe. "Can I?" he asked. Helena carefully transferred the baby into Isaac's arms. He held their son with infinite gentleness, gazing down at him with an expression of pure wonder. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I am your father. I am going to do my best by you, I promise." "What should we name him?" Helena asked. Isaac thought for a moment. "What about Thomas, after your brother?" Fresh tears spilled down Helena's cheeks. "Yes," she said. "Thomas Yates. That is perfect." Little Thomas thrived from the start. He was a healthy, happy baby who seemed to love everything about ranch life. As he grew, he became fascinated by the animals, squealing with delight whenever his father brought him out to see the horses or cattle. Helena balanced motherhood with her ranch work, discovering reserves of energy she had not known she possessed. The ranch continued to prosper. With Helena's careful management of the household and garden, and Isaac's skill with cattle and horses, they built their operation steadily. 2 years after Thomas was born, they added another 100 acres to their property. The cattle herd grew to nearly 400 head. They hired 2 more ranch hands to help with the increased work. When Thomas was 3, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter arrived in early spring, a tiny perfect girl with Helena's dark hair and Isaac's amber eyes. They named her Rose, and if Thomas had been an easy baby, Rose was even easier. She was content to be held, nursed hungrily, and slept through the night within weeks of being born. Thomas was fascinated by his little sister, constantly wanting to help care for her under Helena's watchful supervision. Life fell into a beautiful rhythm. The children grew healthy and strong. The ranch prospered year after year. Helena and Isaac's love deepened with time, strengthened by shared challenges and joys. They had built something lasting together, something that mattered. One evening when Thomas was 6 and Rose was 3, Helena stood on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas was helping his father with the evening chores, seriously carrying a small bucket of feed while Isaac carried the larger one. Rose was inside, playing with wooden blocks Marcus had carved for her. The air smelled of grass and pine and the promise of rain. Isaac emerged from the barn and walked over to join her, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Helena said. "I was remembering the day I arrived in Calistoga, how lost I felt, how scared." "I remember seeing you by the stable," Isaac said. "You looked like you had the weight of the world on your shoulders." "I did." Helena leaned into his warmth. "I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left." And now, Helena looked out at the ranch, at her son trying so hard to be like his father, at the house that was truly home. She thought about Rose's laugh and the way she said "Mama" in her sweet small voice. She thought about the life growing inside her again, another child they had not planned but would welcome with joy. "Now I have everything," she said simply. Isaac kissed the top of her head. "We have everything," he corrected gently, "because we have each other." They stood together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and pink and purple. From inside the house, Helena could hear Rose singing one of the songs she had taught her. In the barn, Thomas's high voice asked his father a question, and Isaac's deep rumble responded with patience and love. This was not the life Helena had imagined when she boarded that train in Missouri all those years ago. It was better. It was built on an impossible offer made by a stranger who saw someone in need and chose to help. It was built on trust given when trust seemed foolish, on love found in the most unexpected place. Helena thought about that day in the restaurant when Isaac had made his proposal. "My wealth is yours if you will have me," he had said. But the wealth he had given her was so much more than land or cattle or money in the bank. He had given her a home when she had none. He had given her partnership when she was alone. He had given her love when she had stopped believing she would ever find it, and she had given him the same in return. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. Isaac squeezed her gently. "Come on. Let us get the children ready for bed. Tomorrow is another day, and the ranch waits for no one." Helena smiled and followed him inside, to the home they had made, to the family they had built, to the life they shared. It was a life that had started with desperation and an impossible offer, but had become something neither of them could have imagined. It was imperfect and challenging and absolutely wonderful. It was everything. The years continued to roll by with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Helena gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Samuel, in the spring of 1879. He was a quiet baby, thoughtful even as an infant, with Helena's dark eyes and a serious expression that made Marcus joke. He looked like a tiny old man. Thomas grew into a capable young helper, following his father everywhere and soaking up everything Isaac taught him about ranching. By the time he was 8, he could ride as well as any ranch hand and knew how to doctor a sick calf or mend a fence. Rose, meanwhile, showed more interest in her mother's domain, learning to garden and cook with fierce concentration. She also demonstrated an unexpected talent with horses, able to calm even the most skittish animals with her quiet presence. The ranch itself continued to expand and thrive. By 1880, the Yates Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region. They ran nearly 600 head of cattle and had built a reputation for quality horses as well. Isaac had proven himself a shrewd businessman, knowing when to expand and when to consolidate, when to sell and when to hold. But the success never changed him. He remained the same steady, hard-working man Helena had married, still rising before dawn to work alongside his ranch hands, still treating everyone with respect and fairness. The only difference was the silver starting to thread through his dark hair and the deeper lines around his eyes from years of squinting in the sun. Helena had changed too, though she barely recognized it herself. The frightened, desperate woman who had arrived in Calistoga was gone, replaced by someone confident and capable. She managed the household with skill, kept the books for the ranch, raised their children, and still found time to help neighbors when they needed it. She had become a pillar of the small community, someone people turned to for advice and assistance. On their 10th wedding anniversary in September of 1883, Isaac surprised Helena by taking her into town for a proper celebration. They left the children with Marcus, who had become like family over the years, and spent the night at the hotel where Helena had stayed that first desperate week. Over dinner at the restaurant where Isaac had first proposed, he handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a gold locket with their wedding date engraved on the back. "I never gave you a proper wedding gift," Isaac said. "I wanted to fix that." Helena opened the locket to find tiny photographs inside, one of their 3 children together and one of Helena and Isaac on their wedding day, a photograph she did not even know existed. "The preacher's wife took it," Isaac explained. "I asked her to, even though we did not have money for fancy things back then. Well, I had money, but I did not want you to think I was showing off. I finally got around to getting copies made and having them sized to fit the locket." Helena looked at the photographs, her throat tight with emotion. In the wedding photo, they both looked so young and uncertain, 2 people embarking on an unlikely journey together. "We were practically children," she said. "We were scared," Isaac corrected gently. "At least I was. Terrified you would realize what a gamble you were taking and change your mind." "I was terrified too," Helena admitted. "But I am so glad I said yes. I am so glad you asked." Isaac reached across the table and took her hand. "These have been the best 10 years of my life. You gave me everything I hoped for and so much more. You gave me a family, a real home, a purpose beyond just working and surviving. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I loved you pretty fiercely even then." "You did not love me on our wedding day," Helena said with a soft laugh. "You barely knew me." "Maybe not the way I love you now," Isaac conceded, "but I loved the possibility of us. I loved your courage for saying yes, and I loved knowing I would get to spend my life learning all the reasons to love you more." Helena felt tears slip down her cheeks. After 10 years of marriage, Isaac could still make her cry with his words. "I love you," she said. "I love the life we have built. I love who we have become together." They spent the evening walking through Calistoga, which had grown considerably since Helena's arrival. New buildings lined the main street, gas lamps illuminated the sidewalks, and the town had an air of prosperity and permanence. Helena remembered walking these same streets feeling invisible and terrified, and she marveled at how much had changed. The next morning, they collected their children from the ranch. Thomas, now 10, reported very seriously that everything had gone well in their absence. Rose, 7 years old and increasingly independent, was eager to show her mother the cookies she had made with Marcus's help. Samuel, 4 and still his mother's shadow, climbed into Helena's arms and refused to let go for a solid hour. Life continued its steady progression. Thomas became more independent, eventually taking on real responsibilities around the ranch. Rose's gift with horses developed into genuine skill, and by the time she was 12, she was helping break and train the young horses. Samuel remained the quiet one, preferring books to ranching, which worried Isaac until Helena reminded him that the ranch would need someone who could handle the business side as it continued to grow. In 1887, Thomas turned 14 and began talking about wanting to learn more about cattle breeding. Isaac arranged for him to spend a season working on a larger ranch to the east, learning from some of the best cattlemen in California. It nearly broke Helena's heart to see her firstborn ride away, even though she knew it was necessary for his education. But he came back 6 months later, taller and more confident, full of ideas about improving their own operation. Isaac listened carefully to everything Thomas had learned, and together they began implementing changes that would make the ranch even more productive. The following year brought both joy and sorrow. In the spring, they welcomed their 4th child, a daughter they named Elizabeth. She arrived with Helena's dark hair and a loud cry that suggested a fierce personality to match. But in the autumn, Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep. He had been with them for 15 years, and his loss hit the entire family hard. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple marker that read, "Marcus Coleman, faithful friend." As the century drew toward its close, Helena sometimes found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. She was 41 years old now, with gray threading through her dark hair and lines marking her face from years of sun and hard work and laughter. Isaac was nearly 50, his hair more silver than brown, but still strong and vital. Their children were growing into capable young adults. Thomas was 20 and increasingly running much of the ranch operation himself. Rose at 17 could outride most of the ranch hands and had a gift for training horses that drew buyers from across the state. Samuel, 14, had his nose constantly in books but also showed a sharp mind for numbers and business. Elizabeth, the baby at 7, was already showing signs of inheriting her father's stubbornness and her mother's determination. One evening in the summer of 1893, 20 years after Helena had arrived in Calistoga, she and Isaac sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the distant mountains. The children were all inside, engaged in various activities. The ranch hummed with life and purpose. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Helena asked. "When I was standing by the stable looking lost." "All the time," Isaac admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past. I was in a hurry that day, had things to do in town, but something made me stop and talk to you. I am not usually one to believe in fate, but sometimes I wonder if we were meant to find each other." "My brother led me to you," Helena said softly. "In a way, if I had not come looking for him, if you had not known him and wanted to honor his memory, none of this would have happened." "Then I owe Thomas more than I can ever repay," Isaac said. "He brought me you. He brought me our family." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant rumble of thunder, Lightning flickered on the horizon, illuminating the clouds from within. The air smelled of approaching rain and the particular electric charge that precedes a storm. "I have been thinking," Isaac said eventually, "about the future. Thomas is capable of running this ranch without me. Rose will either marry and have her own place, or she can stay and run the horse operation. It is her choice. Samuel will probably go to school back east, study business or law or something that uses that brain of his. Elizabeth still has years before we need to worry about her path." "What are you saying?" Helena asked. "I am saying that we have spent 20 years building this ranch. We have done well. Our children are provided for. The operation is solid. Maybe it is time for us to take things a little easier. Not retire exactly, but step back. Let Thomas take the lead. Travel a bit if you want. Just enjoy what we have built instead of constantly working to build more." Helena considered this. The idea of slowing down felt strange after so many years of constant work, but it also felt appealing. She was tired in a way she had not admitted even to herself. The thought of having time to simply be without always having tasks and responsibilities pulling at her was seductive. "I would like that," she said. "Maybe we could visit Missouri. I have not been back since I left, and I would like to see it again. Show the children where their mother grew up." "We can do that," Isaac agreed. "And anything else you want. You gave me everything I asked for 20 years ago, Helena. You made my wealth our wealth, my dreams our dreams. Now I want to give you whatever you want for the next 20 years. Helena reached over and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I just want to be with you," she said simply. "That is all I have ever really wanted. Everything else, the ranch, the success, the prosperity, it is wonderful, but it is not what matters most. You matter most. Our family matters most. As long as I have that, I have everything." The storm broke then, rain sweeping across the valley in visible sheets. It reached the ranch in a rush, drumming on the roof and turning the dusty yard to mud in minutes. Helena and Isaac moved their chairs back under the protection of the porch roof and sat watching the downpour. Thomas came out to join them, now a full-grown man, tall and broad-shouldered like his father. "That is going to be good for the grass," he observed, settling into a chair beside them. "It is," Isaac agreed, "though we will need to check on the herd tomorrow, make sure none of them got spooked and ran." "I will take care of it," Thomas said with easy confidence. "You two should sleep in for once. You have earned it." Helena smiled at her son, this man who had once been a baby in her arms. "When did you get so responsible?" she teased. "I had good teachers," Thomas replied, his expression softening. "Everything I know, everything I am, I learned from watching you and Father. You built something amazing here, not just a ranch, but a family and a life worth living. I hope I can do the same someday." "You will," Isaac said with certainty. "You already are." They sat together, 3 generations bound by blood and love and shared purpose, watching the storm water the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. Inside the house, Helena could hear Rose singing while she did some mending, and Samuel reading aloud to Elizabeth from one of his books. This was what mattered. This was what all the hard work and struggle had been for. As the storm passed and the evening settled into peaceful darkness, Helena reflected on the impossible journey that had brought her here. 20 years ago, she had been penniless and alone, facing a future that terrified her. A stranger had offered her an unlikely solution, asking nothing but partnership in return for security and a home. That partnership had grown into love. That home had grown into a legacy. And that security had given them both the foundation to build lives richer than either could have imagined. Helena had arrived in Calistoga with nothing. But a cowboy had said his wealth was hers if she would have him. And in accepting his offer, She had gained not just his wealth but his heart, his loyalty, and his unwavering love. In return, she had given him the same, and together they had created something that would endure long after they were gone. It was not the story she had expected to live, but it was the perfect story nonetheless. As thunder rumbled one final time in the distance and Isaac squeezed her hand gently, Helena sent a silent thank you to her brother Thomas, whose death had brought her west, and to the stranger who had become everything by simply offering help when it was most desperately needed. She had been left penniless. A cowboy had offered his wealth, but what they had built together was worth far more than money or land. They had built a life, a family, and a love that would echo through generations. And that, Helena thought as she leaned her head on Isaac's shoulder, was the greatest wealth of all.